Welcome to Practice Disrupted, a podcast where we find ways to create new solutions to current challenges while elevating the value of architects. I'm your host, Evelyn Lee, an architect who spans tech as an angel investor, startup advisor, and founder of Practice of Architecture. Whether you're a seasoned architect or just starting in the field, this podcast is your gateway to think differently about the role architects play within our global community. Hello, Disruptors. Welcome to this week's episode of Practice Disrupted. Today, we're honored to interview Douglas Ito, FAIA, the 2024 recipient of the AIA Whitney M Young Jr. Honor Award. Douglas is a managing member of SMR Architects in Seattle, Washington, and he has an outstanding legacy in the architectural world, particularly in affordable housing. As a past president of AIA Washington Council and someone who has previously served on numerous committees for both AIA Washington Council and AIA Seattle, Douglas's dedication to design excellence is evident in the many accolades his work has earned, including the 2020 AIA HUD Secretary's Housing Accessibility Alan J. Rothman Award and the 2021 Urban Land Institute's Jack Kemp Excellence in Affordable and Workforce Housing Chairman's Award. Douglas has made a tremendous impact, creating over 2,800 units of affordable housing, including 1,300 units dedicated to permanent supportive housing for vulnerable populations. His work not only addresses the urgent need for housing, but also confronts the racial, social, and political injustices that persist in our communities. In this episode, we'll dive into Douglas's career, his approach to architecture, and his advocacy for housing equity. Stay tuned for an inspiring conversation on all of that and his view on the future of practice. Hi, Douglas. Thank you so much for joining us and taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us here today.
Great. It's great to be able to talk to you.
We are here to celebrate you and you winning the Whitney Young Jr. or being, the honoree of the Whitney M Young Jr. Award for 2024. So I like to do a little bit of an icebreaker. You kind of did, so thank you for that. But even more of a little icebreaker, is there anything that you're looking forward to in the near future, either personally or professionally?
Professionally, I hope that the Whitney Award can be a useful open door for communication outside of the AIA, because I think, the AIA does a really good job about preaching to the choir. We architects can talk to other architects about diversity. We can talk to everybody about climate change. We can talk to everybody about all sorts of things that really we are interested in and impact us. However, we do a very, very poor job about talking to politicians, to the general public, to any number of people out there who, and there was another video that the AIA took that has me saying that, architects, we save lives, because everybody just thinks we make pretty buildings, and that's all we do. They don't understand the nuances and all the things that we actually are responsible for legally, like life safety and making sure that all the sub-consultants are working together to create a building. They just think, we come in the end when the contractor's ready, and we just kind of put in some windows and make it pretty. And politicians, when I go talk to legislators, that's what they think. So they always go to a contractor to ask questions about design or anything else. You go to the general public and you talk to them when you're doing a presentation. That's what they think you do. And I think there's a long history of that architects are the tastemakers, which thankfully we are to some degree, but we are also people who are professional and are responsible for a huge number of things that people just don't understand.
I mean, we could go a lot deeper into that one. I would say it doesn't help that our websites just show pictures of pretty buildings and not even go into the making of those buildings. Sometimes and the community outreach that a lot of, affordable multifamily, affordable housing covers. But before we go there, I would like to know more about you as a person. So is there anything not in your formal bio that you would like to share about Douglas Ito, even the non-architect?
Well, one thing that I've been doing that is sort of non-architecture that I'm been interested in is I have co-founded a nonprofit called Isan Bellevue, which is a nonprofit set up to talk about and showcase the the JA community in Bellevue, Washington. And that's where my grandfather settled as a pioneer in the late 19th century, and where we have my family has a history there. So it's about Bellevue and the JA community there, but it's also touches on the incarceration that happened in the 40s during World War II. And it's a hub and spoke type project where we'll have one large center art piece with other things that go around Bellevue that talk about the JA community there. But the centerpiece would be a social justice piece that talks about Never Again Now, which talks to incarceration and how that cannot happen again, especially given after 9/11, everybody wanted to, it was so close to the government, rounding up Arab Americans and putting them in camps, very similar to what happened in World War II. Also, the immigration situation that we have and people putting people in detention. I mean, there's a lot of things that touch every day in what happened in World War II. So it's a bigger picture sort of touch on that whole situation.
I think then we have to have another conversation that I wasn't planning on, and we probably can't cover in this hour, about just like how you manage time and having a family of your own and running a firm and the energy to then come up and support this nonprofit organization. So is there anything else that you'd like to share about your background before we dive in a little deeper?
I think the other thing that I hope that Whitney does is give other young architects an idea that, if you are a person of color, if you're Asian American, that you can also be a firm leader and do social justice work and go out and, participate in the AIA, or just go down to the legislature and make your voice heard. I mean, it's not common to find that in society. So hopefully like I said, I hope that the award can open those doors for people.
I think you are definitely getting ahead of the questions that I had, which is perfectly fine. Don't be hard on yourself. But I would love to go to the beginning of your story and becoming an architect. Do you have a defining moment in your mind where like, I want to be an architect? Or was this something that came to you over time?
So in high school, I went to public high school, and there was a teacher, John Livingston, who was very much, I think he was somebody who wanted to be an architect and didn't become one, and was a school teacher. And in high school, he was in the humanities program, and somehow everything he taught circled back to architecture in some way. And I think he wanted all his students to become architects. And that was something that got implanted into my head. And I also took a lot of fine art drawing classes and things like that in school. And they were all like, oh, yeah, you should go to college and you should do fine arts. And I'm like, well, yeah, but I don't think I can make any money doing fine arts.
So why not architecture?
Yeah, why not architecture, where you can't maybe make no money? So in high school, I thought, yeah, I think architecture is going to be the thing I try to do. So then getting into college, went to the UW. I, of course, having dutiful, strong Asian parents, thought education was the best thing in the world and they would pay for it. So so much privilege from that. which I kind of took advantage of because I went 7 years undergrad full time and took like all sorts of classes that I wanted to take, like Italian and drawing classes. And I took every architecture class I could take without going into the major before that. And then I got into it. And then at the University of Washington, there was a professor, Michael Piatok, who also does affordable housing. And his name is huge for affordable housing throughout the country. And he taught at the UW. And so I took a number of courses from him. And, that actually versus, I'm going to do some I like design. That's nothing wrong with high design. But how can high design and affordable housing cross paths is something I tried to do and try to get our staff to do. But, at the time, it was hard to understand how a house that is hanging off of a cliff would cost, multi millions of dollars had any sort of social resonance with me. So I gravitated toward Michael's classes and understanding of what I could do in the future. And then after school, I started working at SMR Architects, which was a firm in Seattle that had just started doing affordable housing. And I kind of never left and became one of the owners. And that is, being an owner lets you have some leeway on having personal things that you can do sometimes, even though I still have to be billable.
I would love to get into, how SMR Architects has allowed you to grow over your career a little bit later. When did this social justice and kind of activist voice come to you? And I say this from a perspective as a fellow Asian American. So I'm first generation, and I was very much, raised under everything that falls under the auspices of the model minority, right? Keep my head down, hard work, everything essentially related to assimilation, which ultimately is a quiet voice. So when did you find your voice in this?
I think the world in which I work in which our firm does, obviously has a lot of social justice minded developers, owners of nonprofits that all come into play. I think early in my career, it was a long time ago, so there wasn't a whole lot out there to do. People, I don't think architects in general did anything that linked to housing or social justice advocacy. But as I grew in the firm, as I grew in the profession, opportunities opened up. And thankfully, the two founding partners, Jerry Stickney and Ron Murphy at our firm, had left space open for anyone in the office to go onto a board if they were asked or wanted to do it. So that was, I think, a huge thing that helped elevate my consciousness on what I could do. And it was kind of more personal than office, but they were all linked to what we were doing in the office. So housing, social justice was there, and that's what I kind of fell into in a lot of ways. A lot of things for a lot of people it just seems like, happenstance, like, I've been asked to be on this board or whatever. And you don't know if it's because of the work you've done or because of other things you've done that you may be asked. And I think once you get onto that path, if you get on a board and you understand and you do the right thing on a board, and people understand that when they ask you to do something, you do it, just like any job, that you'll be asked for other boards. And then I have this horrible problem of saying yes to things. So you get on more boards. But like I said, thankfully, the firm was always very open to it. In a lot of ways, it is somewhat marketing because you get to see all your clients, other things, but also you can't do that kind of work without actually believing it. So I think one of the things that from that, I really, really want to make sure that staff that we have currently are able to get a seat on a board or get into that sort of pathway. If they choose not to, that's fine too. But there are people who we are now at a size and kind of the type of work we do, the people who come to our firm want to do affordable housing and want to do some social good. And some of them want to just do that, and some of them actually want to do more. And so we do keep that pathway open to staff to say, hey, if you want to do this, we can help you, and try to make it less so that it like pops out of nowhere, that we can try to guide them on the way, and we're here to advise them on things as they have their own journeys.
In my own professional career, like I am grateful for all the doors that opened to me, that not only opened to me, but others held open and kind of pushed me through in my own leadership. So I appreciate kind of you sharing that was an opportunity that helps you also find your voice and kind of give you permission to have that as well.
It's also a thing where I really do understand the whole like assimilation. I mean, I present very much as a, I don't have an accent. I don't, I present as, I think anyway, in my mind, that if you didn't see me, no one would know that I'm Asian American or whatever. I have a very Seattle accent, whatever. But as I'm actually a first and third generation, my mom's from Japan and my dad is from Bellevue, I can understand in Asian culture in America is all about assimilation, especially for the JA community because of the war. My dad was very, after that, it was very much, you will do X because that's what's expected of you. They sent me to a church, even though they did not go. I found somebody to take me to a nice Episcopal church. They school is where you're going to go, and that's what you're going to do. And there are things that I do currently that are probably linked to that ingrained sort of mentality that my parents put on me. Like, oddly, I wear a tie every day to the office, and it's Seattle and West Coast, so no one wears a tie. But so I guess I'm not just going to fall into the background, but I do it for a couple of reasons. I do it, one, it is the standardized sort of idea of somebody who knows what they're doing. So I started it because when I had to go on a job site, I am a short, somewhat chubby Asian American who has sort of no real presence on a job site. And so I wanted to make sure that the contractor knew that I was the one who was going to tell them no, to redo it or do whatever they needed to do. And it was amazing how much a tie and a dress shirt did on site. So I figured I'll just wear a tie every day.
It's funny. I have similar stories. I did a lot of K through 12 schools when I was first out of school. I would be surveying a high school, and the teachers would be asking me if I have my hall pass to be out of class using the bathroom. So I definitely changed my attire after that, and I felt in Orange County, California, similarly, I felt overdressed compared to my peers, but it was in my head kind of a bit of a necessity for me to be able to establish not only my own confidence, but to ensure that people don't mistake me for a high schooler. So, yeah.
Yeah. And it's the other thing is, like as an Asian American, what I see now is so many in our firm and other places, like, I'm just going to sit, on the side, on the back row. And I'm always telling people, especially job meetings, especially other meetings, it's like, especially if you're a person of color, especially if you're a woman, no, get your butt up to the table. You need to be at the table because people won't know why you're there or anything else. They'll just think you're the person carrying the drawings or something like that. You have a voice. You need to be at the table. And if you're there first, take the prime spot at the table because you need to push yourself into that position, or you're not going to feel comfortable in it later on. So you need to do that. And, that is a real hard thing, I think, especially for kids coming out of the pandemic, the newest generation of kids that are coming out. They don't see the social interaction piece of it, that everything about your career, about business, about everything else is about relationships. And you need to set the tone for those relationships, especially in a construction site, that you aren't the one going to be walked over. And it's hard when you're a person of color, or you're gay, or you're a woman. So, you need to do some subtle messaging.
I love all the storytelling that you're doing. I want to talk about the Whitney Young Junior Award, though. And what was your story about learning about the award and then pursuing the award?
I heard about and knew about Whitney M. Young a while ago, maybe 10 years ago. It didn't connect to me that there was an award named after him, but I knew about his speech. I knew about his civil justice work, etc. I was thinking about going for fellowship, and then just generally looking through all these awards that the AIA has out there on their site, which is great. And I came across Whitney M. Young. I was like, oh, what's this? So I looked at it, and the interesting thing is, in the blurb about the Whitney M. Young, it does say affordable housing. And if you go through his speech that he gave to the AIA in Portland, a big chunk of it was calling out architects for doing a crappy job for affordable housing for the people who need housing the most. So when I read affordable housing, I thought, well, that does talk to what I do in our firm and what I do personally, and, social justice work. And it's very topic du jour these days. Affordable housing is a problem not just in Seattle, not just in San Francisco or New York or Chicago. It is an issue everywhere. Small cities are having the same issue. And there's a lot of talk about it politically at every level of government. And so I thought, well, if the AIA was interested in this crisis, the affordable housing crisis, that, I might have a chance of doing that. So I thought, well, I'll go for that. And so I did.
Obviously, there's a very strong connection behind your background and what you're doing in affordable housing and the speech itself. You talked a little bit about what you would hope the recognition of being a recipient of this award would do for Asian Americans, and then for younger architects, and those that are interested in having a strong voice in social justice. Is there anything else that you would hope that you winning this award will inspire, not only in future generations, but even current, like mid-career architects?
I think the importance of the Whitney isn't that every architect should necessarily have to go into social justice work or go into doing affordable housing or any of that. It is that even if you're doing work that isn't that you have a voice, and if you have a conscience that leads you to social justice, racial justice, housing justice, that you still have a voice and can make that known to people. And I want to emphasize, outside of architecture, because it does no good to talk about it to other architects. I'm sorry I know this podcast goes out to architects, but
no, I mean, it's called Practice Disrupted. So it's about disrupting the status quo. So absolutely. Yes.
It is, when a housing levy is in your area, to go out and make your voice heard. If there is some issue about Black Lives Matter, you should go out there and make your voice heard. Now, I understand how the AIA, as a membership organization, because I've been on boards of many membership organizations now, sometimes cannot make a radical voice heard as the quote AIA. However, you personally, as a citizen of this country, have every right to go out and talk to your politicians that represent you, to other groups that want to hear your voice, to make it known. The benefit of being an architect is there's a huge cachet that comes with being an architect, of being this sort of sound voice of reason on so many things. So when an architect can come out and say, this is wrong, we need to do more for housing, we need to do more for racial justice, Black lives do matter, that is a huge thing that we have in our pocket that we need to use more and more individually, not just as an organization.
So the flip side to that is, and I'm just playing the devil's advocate, is a lot of people say that architecture is not political. Do you believe architecture to be political, or do you believe architects should have a more political voice? And is there a distinction between the two?
That's a tough question. and it's one of those questions that, like I said, it is at the crux of so many membership organizations. Even conservative organizations like the Master Builders or something like that have liberal and conservative voices within a membership. Even a membership organization about affordable housing have completely, potentially different views about affordable housing and how it should, in particular when money comes to play, how money should be allocated. So organizationally, I can see having some qualms about going too political. However, if 95% of your organization believes in a cause or a social justice outcome or anything else, maybe you should actually step up to the plate and make a comment and not have 5 years of debate before you do that and it becomes irrelevant. Because, maybe the 5% that say are against you, maybe they don't belong in the organization anymore. Just saying.
I'm going to leave that one alone, but I'm more interested in your take as the Whitney M. Young Junior Award, organizations aside. I guess, do you believe that architecture is inherently political?
Oh, I think architecture can be very political, very political. You look at Nazi Germany, the buildings they built for civic use, for the government to tell people what they should think, I think is extremely political. I think when architects are told that they shouldn't do something because it looks one way or the other, I think it's also can be very political. I think people use a lot of things that are not architecture to try to change the built environment, but it affects us, and we could push back more on that. Like, people use the code a lot of times, which is what we do all the time, is use the code, but they use that code to, it's not necessarily architecture, but it's people who use the code and other things for, NIMBYs who don't want something in their neighborhood because of those people. I think the buildings themselves are not that political, but the purpose for those buildings is very political sometimes. And for you to be an architect and not have a stance if you're doing that work is wrong. If you don't believe in doing that work, you shouldn't take that work. And that's not necessarily political, but if your political beliefs don't align with social justice work that an organization or a developer or an owner wants to have, then there's something wrong with that equation. either with the developer hiring you or with you doing it just because you want the money.
That I can definitely get on board with. I want to talk about your lengthy stay SMR Architects, only because I feel like it's unusual to find an individual these days that have stayed their entire career in one place. And we change a lot over time too as individuals. And I think a lot of movement between firms is often an unwillingness to accommodate for that change over time. So I'm interested in hearing about like how SMR has supported your career growth in a way that you felt was productive to the goals that and aspirations that you set for yourself.
I think for me to land at SMR, I was extremely lucky in that the firm was there and able to and understood that my career path and growth could go along with the firm. When I started at SMR, it was very small. It was Stickney and Murphy Architects. It was very small, maybe 8 people, and now we're at 39. So I was able to grow with that firm. I think if I had gone to a 200-person firm, it's a completely different trajectory because you're just kind of a cog. And you're not an individual who somebody could mentor or understand how their wants and desires for architecture can align with the firm's wants and desires for everything. So I think I was incredibly lucky. I think I understand that a lot of people coming out of school are jumping around because one, money. I mean, completely understandable that jumping from firm to firm might get you more money, but the staying at one firm, if it's a good firm, allows you to learn everything you need to do to if you want to go into leadership, because without the support of the firm you can't get into leadership. Going back to the whole Asian thing, it's a lot easier to become and less risky to become a leader within a firm and become a leader and be at the top of the pile, right? Than going off on your own. Going off on your own, risky and could be very financially scary. So, the stability of being able to stay at a firm, if you're you also have to be a really good worker. You have to have some talent. You have to know what you want to do. You have to be able to push leadership to say, this is, what I want and how it benefits the firm. There's a lot of stuff staying in a firm allows you to do if you are set up for it. Jumping around, you might not learn all the things you need to do until you settle into a job that you feel comfortable in and that you feel like you can advance in. So I think like if I had gone to a really big firm, I think I would have lost out on a lot of things.
So let's talk about leadership and mentorship. And this is like a moment where I wish I had Janine with me back on as co-host. But one of the things that we've always experienced is that there's not a lot of emphasis on leadership development, even within firms, because you learn by doing and you learn from the people in front of you. And the culture and the architecture industry isn't that, just very generically, the definition of how leaders lead within the industry is not necessarily a great one, especially for someone who has stepped into other industries like tech and like was at I truly believe, one of the best companies to work for during the pandemic because of the leadership team that was in place. So how does SMR Architects develop that leadership? And then simultaneously, what has that change look like? You talk about like the next generation coming out of the pandemic and helping those individuals find their voice too.
So at our firm, we really want to make sure we develop well-rounded architects. So you come in as an EP, we want to make sure that you understand that we don't want you just to, do tile details for a bathroom for 4 years in a row. we want you to, we will bring you to job meetings. We'll bring you to an owner's meeting where we're discussing design. We want to have, and we understand that, there's a lot of boring in architecture, and we want to let you have some fun. So let you design something like, okay, it may be at the beginning a trash enclosure, but it may also be something like the office layout or something else that you can get your teeth into and get some ownership of, so that you can build what you need in architecture. So, or like if a small project comes in, like a TI or something small, we will, if you've been here a little while, just to get you into understanding what an architect does and a project manager does, those small projects have every piece of the pie as a $20 million project. But the risk is low for the individual doing it and for the firm. So it's like, hey, do you want to take this project? It's a small project. It'll be just you, a principal, and you doing it. We want you, we think you have that. You're at the point where you can take that on, and you will learn from that. And, we try to build them into understanding all the facets that happen in a project in a firm. And then we do have things where, we send them to training for project management and things like that. But also in Seattle, there's the Housing Development Consortium, who has a leadership development program. We send them through to that, a lot of our staff. So, because leadership is about, like I said earlier, it's about relationships and networking. So they go there, they are in leadership with a training program with young developers, young contractors,
your future partners and clients. Yeah.
Exactly. So they can start building the base of network that they need to move on in their career, whether it's here, hopefully, or in other places. And we understand that, has some risk in that people move and do other things. But it's, if they don't get some taste of it, they miss out. And the earlier, the better. And when they have that, that's when those things start to potentially fall into place. Like their network grows, they mature in the field, they have friends who then are in leadership in something else, and they ask, hey, we recommended you to be on a board, and then we're able to then allow them to be on a board, which also increases their network and their ability to get work or to talk about SMR or any number of things. So, it's not about holding on to this precious commodity of leadership. We want to have everybody start lifting up, because the more everybody's lifting up in the firm, the better the firm can be. So, there are rainmakers. It's always going to be the case. But if everybody thinks that everybody in the firm is doing great work, then, and there's nothing wrong with that. We see it as leadership in our firm as well as the affordable housing community. So we want to make sure that it's all out there. We just had somebody in our office who we would have loved to stay here and be a fabulous architect and could have been great, got snatched away by an affordable housing developer to be a developer for a while because they're having difficulty finding developers. And they thought, well, this person's great, and they know the field, they know what's going on. And that person thought, well, opportunity, they may come back to us, they may come back to architecture with that knowledge base that helps us out if they come back here. So, it's all good.
Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate it. Those thoughts humanize you. I think, right, every leader wants to be putting time and commitment into future leaders in the hopes that they obviously often stay, but knowing that they might leave. And I think that shouldn't stop us from putting those resources behind those individuals.
The other thing that I've done on all the boards that I've been on has been not necessarily for the firm, because all the boards I've been on, I've tried and have been successful at bringing on not only emerging professionals that are architects, but within whatever the field it is, that each board should bring on like 2 or 3 junior members of the community at large to be on the board, so their voices are known, so to be more relevant. In particular, at AIA Washington Council, we started the Board Associates program, where we bring 2 emerging professional people from Washington State to be on our board. Tammy and I worked really hard to get that started. I think as a cohort, we have 3 every year. And we don't just say, oh, you're on the board. We are there to mentor them, talk to them. Hopefully, Tammy is able to, when we have the money, to send them to convention or to leadership in the AIA so they can get that piece of leadership as well at a very young age. They, through that, we can get them onto YAF or any number of other things that hopefully will benefit and help them in their careers overall. So that's more of a general thing. And then at AIA Washington Council, we've started SMR Architects, and AIA Washington Council have started a scholarship program for emerging professional or people, first year students in either college and or community colleges or trade schools, where, because in Washington you can go into architecture through a different method. You don't have to be masters of architecture to get it. So it's our way of trying to encourage people to go into architecture. And in particular, it's a diversity scholarship. So it's about diversity. And if you're BIPOC or LGBTQ or any number of things, you have to self-identify your diversity and why you deserve this scholarship. It's not a huge amount of money, but it was important for us to start that conversation and getting diversity in. And as part of that scholarship also comes with mentorship from AIA Washington Council board members or whoever is involved, that they can always come to us and ask us questions about their career, questions about school, any number of things. So it's all about, different levels of mentorship in different career paths and where they are in becoming an architect. That's a huge focus for me, to make sure that, we can, like Jedi, it's great. But when you look at the demographics, the other Whitney Award winners have said, okay, 1960, whatever, when Whitney M. Young Jr. was talking about it, the number of Black architects in the AIA was like 2%, and it's still the same. So there hasn't been any change. But unless you tell people that this is a path they can take, why would they take it? They can be, if you're a recent immigrant, if you're Black, if you're anyone in the world and you're smart, are you going to go into tech and try to make $500,000 a year? Are you going to be a doctor? Are you going to be a lawyer, professionally? Or are you going to be an architect? And architects do okay, but it's not that. So, what can we do to tell young people that architecture is a great profession when they're looking at the money? There are other things that architecture does for you.
That's my bucket too, right? Honestly, yes. I think we should be encouraging people to look beyond the money. And actually, I'm very hopeful that Gen Z is doing that. But also, how do we make architecture profession and practice, and even our business model, one that encourages more people to stay and is equally competitive with the tech industry, so that doesn't become that's a non-decision to me.
But I think currently it's a tough one.
It is. It's one that I made.
Yeah. But if you've got your parents have paid for, or you've clawed through scholarships and financial aid to take on the huge amount of money that you have to do to be a master's of architecture, they have to pay that off. It's a huge potential debt for anybody. And I feel like, thankfully, I didn't have the financial issues because my dutiful parents. But it puts people, 10 steps back because financially coming out of school, they're hamstrung. So there has to be something else. And how can we as a profession tell people, young people, that, hey, there's something here more than a pretty building, right? There's something you can do. I think I agree with you. The next generation coming out of school want to do work that's meaningful. There's always going to be the ones who want to do a skyscraper or, some glorious mansion somewhere. There's always that. But I think there were always people who are like, I want to do something more than that. And I think they just have to open their eyes to other, look at firms and seeing what they're doing. And if there's something that talks to them, whether it's affordable housing, whether it's education or anything else that they think that they can feel like they're doing good in the world, as well as having a profession, I think it's a huge thing that the AIA should espouse to the younger generation.
So we've talked a lot about the firm and yourself and your background leading up to being the Whitney Young Junior Award winner or honoree for 2024. What are some of your favorite moments that you've had in your career that keep you motivated as an architect?
I think there isn't really any one thing. I mean, I think one of the things that is a huge thing for people to understand is architecture is actually fun. It is a profession. I know there's some crappy parts to it, but generally you are doing something you love to do. So it's not like work. It's not like I come to work where it's just a drudge and I'm just doing it to earn money so I can retire and get out and then have fun. Designing buildings is a cool thing and it's fun and you get to do it as a profession and make money at it. So once you become a business owner, that's a whole different thing. But and there's some fun and some not fun parts of that. But generally speaking, going into architecture is fun and you can make it more impactful for yourself to make it feel like you're doing something good, and it makes it more fun. And I mean, it's great when a building opens up. It's great when you land a project, but those are like blips on the sort of like on the way of just regular work that you do. I mean, there are times when you get to see somebody that is in one of your buildings that is so grateful that they're able to have a place to live, that they're not living on the street, in the doorway, in a tent. And that's very, very fulfilling. But we do affordable housing. So that it's not that I'm jaded to it, but it is part of why I'm doing this work. So, it is very fulfilling when that happens, but it isn't something that's like a peak that, I want that to happen every day. So it's not the peak. Winning the Whitney and going out on the stage and getting peer recognition for what you do is always something that I'll remember. And it's great to have that peer recognition. And it does stand out because, when you're sitting on the stage and there's 10,000 people there, it's different. I've been at conferences and since I've been board presidents and stuff, you have 1,000 people maybe, but 10,000 is big. And so it will stand out in my mind as a highlight, I should say, I guess.
You've talked, and I'm super grateful that you're talking about a lot about the future of the profession, emerging professionals, and holding them up. What advice do you have for the next generation of architects who do want to be louder within our communities, as you have kind of encouraged people to do throughout this conversation?
If you're an emerging professional, you should always just ask about ask the principals in your firm, like, hey, I want to join this committee on the AIA, or There's the AIA is doing a legislative outreach day, and I think that would be really interesting for me because I'm interested in architecture and what politically happens. Or, I think if you see something where there's a bunch of NIMBYs out there who are like, we don't want this senior affordable housing project or any other affordable housing project in this neighborhood, to, log on to some blog. And I mean, you could be somewhat anonymous too. Just, put your voice out there. It's not always about screaming into a microphone. It's, a lot of small voices can work equally as one really obnoxious loud one like mine.
Hi, Disruptors. Thank you for joining us today on an episode of Practice Disrupted. If you like the content for today's show, you can find all of our past episodes over on practiceofarchitecture.com/podcast. Be a part of the conversation by joining me, our speakers, and other disruptors in our community at practiceofarchitecture.com/community. Our social media handle is Practice of Arch. That's Practice of ARCH. We'd love to hear from you, so feel free to drop us a DM and say hello. Tune in next week for a new conversation on change in the profession.